Hi everyone. My name is Ian and the purpose of this presentation is to introduce how to design a website for an industrial marketer to generate sales. There's a little bit of I shall say, a nuanced difference between the website design for a industrial client in the digital marketing space versus the normal B2C environment. Firstly, it's a B2B environment, and secondly, it has got a fairly long sales cycle that in industrial marketing. And so this means that you've got a long nurture time between getting the prospect into your marketing system as such and getting a final sale. And sometimes you don't get a sale. The person that you've targeted often moves on to another company, and you might get the sale there if you've nurtured him and have the person or the prospect in your marketing system as such. The other thing is also, but this is a great benefit for the industrial marketing in the space, is that the value per client or prospect is very high relative to the cost of acquiring the client. So you are fairly insensitive to Google price changes or Facebook or LinkedIn price changes for the acquisition of a good lead or prospect due to that. And so when you also design a website, it's part of an entire ecosystem that you're developing. So it does really tie into your business goals and marketing plans. So that will be the first step that is really critical in developing a website for an industrial vendor in the industrial space. And once you also then what is also very important for your website is to identify your client audience or your prospect audience, who they are, what drives them, where are they to be found, etc. Because once you've done that, really the rest of your website really falls very much into place, because what you're trying to do is to engineer a journey for your various prospects, from a prospect to an interested party, to a final client, and then also to actually a promoter of your products or services. Because you're doing such a great job for him. And also, what's important when you're starting the process, and for argument's sake, there are many free softwares out there like Google Keyword Planner, and there's Ask the Public and SEMrush, is that you can actually get your keyword that it should pepper your content and your website, etc., by your keyword plan. Because now you start, if you use the keyword planner, you use data to drive your design from your prospect's perspective, and then it also helps you, because often in a B2B space you are so involved and entrenched in your product numbers and model numbers within your organization, but to your client often it's a fairly meaningless number. It doesn't mean anything to them, and so you need to try and speak your prospect's language rather than your internal language. And then the other thing is, of course, is that your website, you have your targeted personas, but you also need to consider other stakeholders, like it would be the media and technology companies and funding partners and government agencies, etc. It depends on your particular circumstance that you're in. As I've mentioned, your website is really part of a greater ecosystem. You would have your audiences. This is typically be often a cold audience, meaning people that could be using your products but don't even know about your existence. So, and you would go and get, these are the people that you need to define and target them, and often your current clients is a good proxy for what is the drivers and the hangout areas of your prospects that you've got. And once you've identified them and know their drivers, your ads and where you place the ads is driven out of that. And then, of course, you bring your prospects from your ads, etc., and your content that they find on a search engine to your website. And from there, you can put them into an appointment funnel or just warm them up with emails. Basically, tell them the great work and opportunities that you provide, i.e., new developments in your particular niche, what you've done to improve your product, etc. And what's important in the B2B space, especially because you are in a long sales cycle. But remember that when you're dealing with a client in the industrial marketing and B2B space, it's not just one person you're dealing with. There's usually a couple of people in your client organization that drive the decision to purchase your product. So you would actually have your clients hanging out quite a long time in this area here, where the blog articles and your basically on your website. So that's where you would build confidence in who you are, what you do, etc. You build confidence with what's on your website, and also prove to your prospects that you are the best in your particular niche. Now, also what's important is to consider the fact that your client, when he comes to your website and when he meets you the first time by seeing an ad or hearing about you from another engineer or whatever, it's a journey for him to know, are you the client, the company that can provide his the product or service that would solve his particular problem. And marketing is very much like dating. You will not ask a girl on the first date, the name of your first child, let's plan the name of our first child, where we live and how, where we'll be married. Dating just does not work like that. Okay, in some cases it might, but very rare, and that's usually a recipe for failure. But anyway, the same happens here, is that you would originally have your strangers and you want to turn them into visitors. So that's basically putting an ad in front of the client, enticing him to become a visitor and becoming a lead. Now, how-to videos, etc., and e-newsletters would turn a visitor into a lead, and that's as gated content, and I'll speak about this a bit later. And then you would turn leads into customers. Basically, and this is also where it really starting to tie in with your sales team, your marketing. So your marketing finds a marketing qualified lead, and there should be a transition to the sales, where the salesperson, especially in a B2B environment, would take the client down the journey, feed him with information, give him a personal contact within your company, and then of course, once you've delivered to your client and you can show that you're the best, you can thrill your client enough to turn him from a customer to, in actual fact, a promoter of your products. And what a fantastic place to be. Now, often digital marketing is not a particularly known thing in the industrial space, but it is very useful the more you think about it. In actual fact, the internet was developed initially for technical people to collaborate with one another. And that's exactly my intent with why I started everything here, is that I just see that industry has all these pockets of knowledge all over the show. And if we can just tie them together, that we can build better systems as an industry. And of course, if we can build better systems, everybody wins. Your company wins by the sale you've made. The system, because it's better, is better in the communities where it's operated. Businesses are more profitable, and the goods and services these businesses provide can be provided cheaper, so hence greater profit margins, or just more people purchasing the products that our clients actually purchase, and hence we do better. So everyone wins. So when sourcing new suppliers and industrial buyers, pay attention to your website. Now, especially as I've mentioned, because it's a long sales cycle, your website where you put your technical specs, the details of your products down, is a great place to put it down. And then also this ties into the whole thing of your brand strength and your reputation, etc. All these things build and they tie into your website as an holistic presence in the mind of your prospect or client. Now, another study done also showed the impact of a company's website on the perception as a credible technical vendor. Remember, if you've got a great product as a company, and you can place yourself in the mind of your prospect as the credible technical competent vendor, you've really got an inside track. And this study by True Marketing showed that 52% consider the website as the primary place to build technical incompetence. And that's also tied to your content, and we'll discuss that a little bit later in this presentation. So once having a website, etc., it's all good and well, but you need to be found. Now, um, you've got various traffic sources, and especially in the B2B space, there's a little bit of a nuanced difference between this and a B2C space. But your website, because of the longer sales cycle, tends to be more important because of the longer nurture cycle in an industrial marketing environment. But Google is particularly important for you, and it's actually all the other search engines for a number of reasons. Remember, a person is typing something in, so he's got an extremely high customer intent with you. So that is why you want to be on Google. It's about more than 90% of online searches are done through Google. Then YouTube is a wonderful place to nurture your clients further, and also how to really to show that you are the top of your game in your particular industry or niche that you're providing. Of course, needless to say, LinkedIn is a great space to be in for a B2B environment, and that is probably the number one social platform in B2B environment. Don't forget Facebook, and especially with the modern algorithms as they have improved. Facebook has improved its algorithm and is actually not a bad place even for a B2B in space, especially considering the fact that you're still dealing with people, and the data that Facebook collects of people and their buyer personas is just absolutely awesome. Then this does tie to your whole ecosystem, but there's a bit of a to and fro here, is that email marketing is actually probably, well, it is your lowest cost marketing or digital marketing type. But once you've captured a client, you can nurture him through your emails, and every now and then direct him back to your website. The other unique thing is about, especially if you're dealing in industrial space, and you think of the engineering institutes and the various mining institutes and the process institutes and chemical engineering institutes, your targeted client or prospect is already aggregating in certain spaces. And if you can get yourself into those various spaces, you can direct them to your website to make, to nurture prospects, to put yourself in the top of the mind of your client. Now, as I've mentioned now for the next slide, that Google is probably your preferential search engine. Now, you're going to hear me throughout this presentation saying how important content is. Content is even important here in search engine optimization, because Google's algorithms have improved. Remember, their desire is to give their users a good experience. And what is a good experience for a user? Finding what they're looking for, having their problem solved and needs met. Now, your desire as a industrial marketing company or selling your goods is to meet that right person and give him what he needs to. So your vision with the requirements, the user's requirements, and Google's, if they align, is a beautiful place to be. So that's where content comes in. So, and especially in the industrial space, remember that we've got very unique search terms like infrared, scanning or whatever that we would use. So we've got very unique search terms and words. So we are also really looking for a very small number of people, but highly profitable people. And that's exactly where Google excels at. Now, to make your search engine work is, of course, to get as many links from your page to other pages. And why I've got this one here on this side here is that the links should be relevant. For argument's sake, if you are in our space, having a link to medical stuff, I mean, our space being in the process engineering / mining space, you do not want to put your links onto every page to do with dentistry. It's nonsensical. In actual fact, the algorithm of Google will penalize you and your quality score goes down, meaning that you will not be on the top 10 of the search engine page, and you typically even want to be on the top 10 of the organic searches for your terms that are relevant to your particular niche. Now, search engine optimization is a long game. Sorry, that's why I've got the birthday cake, is because the longer you're in the game, the more you optimize, the more you will get a highest quality score, and you will start getting to the top of your page when your search terms are put in. onto Google. And in actual fact, what applies to Google will apply to it as well to the other search engines like Bing and Yahoo, etc. Then also to improve your even your web page ranking in a search engine is to have as many links from social media to your page, and you can use, that's why Facebook once again is important, LinkedIn, your YouTube channel, so you link it, so it really does entail an entire system. And then also putting yourself, especially if you're supplying to the industrial engineering space, putting yourself in the various directories, etc. You know, there are many industrial directories, like ThomasNet being one that comes to mind. Now, your web design process, as mentioned earlier, the whole website and your digital marketing is part of our entire ecosystem. So the first step would be to identify your business and marketing goals, etc. Then prioritize your site's target audience. Now, this is, and we'll discuss it shortly, much more detail. But if you can identify, and I've gone through a process of really identifying who your target persona is and done that very well, the rest of your website design actually falls into place, the structure, because you know what journey you want to take the client or prospect leading down, you know what type of content to put down, and then it's a question of just build, and you measure, and you can continually optimize your website, and I will discuss this shortly. Now, just to go to your buyer personas in the industrial in marketing space, there's really three broad, but there could be more, but the process is fairly liquid, but three broad categories. You've got your design engineer, that's typically your specifier, that is the gatekeeper, and the more technical and specific your product is, the more important it is. The more generic your product is, it's probably the procurement managers are more important. And the sad news is, you probably, if you're not more, I shall say, the quality producer, the niche producer, your profit margins tend to be higher if you're a niche product that defines a certain particular need. You can have higher profit margins. But if you're selling, for argument's sake, washers, I'm quite sure you're really just competing on price. So, but the more specific, like a gyratory crusher with a unique interparticle crushing mode, would make you far more unique, and hence you'd be more in this guy's space, and of course then you are in the higher profit margins. And these concerns are typically form, fit, function, and what type of content would you want to give him. You would give him product brochures, size and consideration, CAD files, etc., and more on CAD files a bit later. Then you've got your procurement managers. Yes, they are the final decision maker. And as I've said, tried to mention now, is that the more your niche your type of product is, the more the procurement guy and the final decision maker leans on the design engineer, and you are in the less price sensitive space. And yes, they just want to know that they're not being totally had. But you can also engineer your website to take them on a specific journey, and put the content in front of them in the right way. And then, of course, you've got your maintenance guy. So once your plant is operating, your equipment is in there. If you are a responsive company and you can win him, especially when the need, for argument's sake, there's a breakdown on his plant, and you were the first company to help him, and how you do that, of course, you've got a customer for life. And especially, once again, your objectives and his would be very aligned. He wants to keep the plant up, and if your product and you giving him great service, you are very much aligned to his objectives, and he's going to be extremely loyal customer. So a little bit of a mini monopoly you could create for yourself there by good service. As I've said earlier, once you've defined your persona, really to engineer the journey and the site structure is quite easy. This is just a generic case, just to show that you would design your page, a website, according to the journeys that you want to take the client down as you lead them down your sales funnel. And the different personas will have different journeys. Now, and what's important to me is actually that one has actually rather a growth-driven design. Now, the reason I say this is that you've got different personas, you want to take them down different sales journeys. and you want to use your website for that, amongst others. But Google Analytics, for argument's sake, tracks where your prospect comes in, what page, how long he lingers, how far he scrolls down, all sorts of data you can collect. So this is extremely valuable information in terms of continue optimizing the various journeys that you would lead your prospect down on your website and the information you would provide him. So this is a wonderful place, myself being an engineer, can live in, because it's now a data-driven approach to marketing, as opposed to just the way I feel or touchy feel, but you can have a data-driven and highly effective. And it's not the opinion of who's the strongest in your organization, but what works. Then there are other great tools like Hotjar, etc., that actually on-page tracking. So you've got heat maps that give you an idea of where the person is clicking. So now the color of the button, etc., doesn't become a bun fighting within your organization, but is something in your organization that's based on data and where you're going. And as I said, linking to your other tracking devices that are freely available, like Google Analytics, etc., give you a good idea of how to continually design yourself for a continual improvement of your website and journeys you want to take your prospect down. Just some broad brushstroke design principles I want to show for website is you've got, firstly, is the color wheel, and it's just is that you often want to have colors on opposite of sides of the flower wheel in terms of your basic design. So if you've got here, you can see on this web page here, you've got very much a blue, and your buttons that you want to have stand out will be a color on the opposite side of the color wheel. Now, this is quite important. As I said, you've got various journeys that once a visitor lands on your website, you want to take him. Now, often in the case of industrial marketing, you want to capture, and your aim is to capture your prospect, a qualified prospect's contact details. In this case, an email is probably the best example, because once you've got the guy's email or her email, you can keep feeding them information about the great case studies you've got, the products that you've coming online in your niche. Because remember, if you put especially good technical, and I'll show examples of this later, that would be, it's almost like the information you're putting in front. Let's say the spec for a valve. Now, a normal person, I say normal person, let's say the HR person is not going to be very interested in the valve spec for a pipeline. But an engineer that's particularly in the design, he's going to be particularly interested. So the type of information you put in front of your prospect also makes him qualify himself. Is that really the person you want to deal with? Besides what you use with Google and Facebook, in terms of that you target how you to put your message in front of those people, but then your second tier is the copy that you put in on your website to get themselves identified. But then you get them to click on a button, they go somewhere, they give you their details, and you're at a fantastic place. So that's why I call to action. And a lot of websites don't actually have the idea of taking a person on a journey. The website's just a brochure out there, which is pretty useless. You want a website to help you generate sales. Just another thing is just like, I've got an example that you've got to have what they call a sticky navigation, that once a client lands on a page, you can always go to the various pages of your website, so just to make it a more pleasant experience for your prospect. And then what I've got here is I'm showing a responsive website. What this means is that as the windows change and such, your website also reconfigures, and you can see there it changes from, if it's broad, to a narrow column, that you've got only one column there as the window decreases in size. And this leads me to just remember to think is that a website needs to be designed for mobile as well. And you can think of your mobile being a narrow little strip, that it is actually extremely important. And that's also one of the criteria for Google putting you high on search engine results, is if you're mobile friendly. Okay, and then fast download speed is another one that I need to mention that is quite important to get you high up in the Google search results. Then you also use imagery to grab attention, and we're also familiar with the dwindling attention spans of human beings, and using imagery is a great way to grab more attention. As I said, now content is the fuel of your digital marketing strategy. It drives the content that you put in front of your prospect. It's the information that you use to entice him to give you his contact details. It will be what you would use to nurture him, to give him confidence in who you are as a company, so that he would want to do business with you. Now, the way you would go about developing content is you would have a pillar content, and then you would develop content themes around it, and you'd actually structure your website in such a way that you've got these linkages, because that's another thing. It's internal linkages on your website is also important to Google search engine optimization. The more internal linkages you have within your website, the higher point score Google gives you to be able to make you more findable for your prospect. One thing I also need to mention here is that it's also psychological in nature, in how the industries work, is that engineers love talking to other engineers, myself being one, and how my reaction is to somebody who talks hogwash and doesn't know what the technology. I'm just keep quiet, but I just know I'm dealing with an idiot here. I'm going to be friendly, but I'm looking for the person that knows what he's talking about. And engineers do have their ways, especially when a person starts talking bull. But anyway, the point being is that what I want to say is, you've got, often in your organization, you've got what you would call subject matter experts. Try and use the content and use your subject matter experts in conjunction with somebody like myself to write the content and make your subject matter expert your hero for your client. And that's what you want to do. And often these subject matter experts are very busy, but even if they can just do the basic structure, layout, and type of information, you can give it the job to somebody else to do the detailed writing and putting and posting it, etc. But the idea is to make your subject matter expert the hero, and that's a very effective marketing strategy. Just some further, as I've alluded to, is content best practices, videos and images. A little trick here is to give the name of your images and videos, to name them something related to the keyword searches that you have done for planning of your website. And that is an important step of designing your website, is that also use the tools like Keyword Planner and from Google. There's SEMrush, there's Ask the Public, to get an idea of what are the search terms your prospective client uses to get to you, because that's also a bit of a cure to prevent you putting on your website your internal jargon. Remember, for you and your company, the internal jargon is used to discuss with most of your colleagues in terms of the design of the product you're developing. But for somebody outside your organization, it's pretty meaningless numbers, like a part number for a brake pad is pretty useless for somebody outside that's not dealing with it daily. For him, it's a big brake pad, a small brake pad, one that fits into whatever car. So that's what you're trying to really do here. So give your videos and images names for the searchability, and that's a trick. Then headings and subheadings. That is also how you structure your content on your various blogs, is to include headings and subheadings, and Google gives you extra, I shall say, marks to make yourself more findable. And then outbound links, and I have discussed it earlier, is that link it to other relevant websites, i.e. Engineering institutes related to your field, like in South Africa's case, South African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy is a good link. A link to EXA would be a good link. A link to a educational institute like Cape Town's Chemical Engineering faculty would be a good link. But there are many others that you could think of and do. And then bullets and tables. And if you think about it, these top ones over here really do relate to just how an engineer is taught to write a good article. So there's nothing strange about it. It's just normal practice that we almost have, and that falls so beautifully in place, in line with the way Google would like you to structure your content. Then, this is why I put this last, is yes, there's a general thing of having 500 words or more, but it's not a hard and fast. In actual fact, that's the other trick, is that your keyword, you mustn't do keyword spicing, i.e. just putting keywords for the sake of putting keywords in your content. It should be a natural process. And the same with your content is 500 words or or more is just a broad guideline. The reason being is that, remember, Google's idea, as I said, is to give their visitors a good experience. And so that's the same here. So you don't want to, it must be a natural how you talk to a human being is how you would write your content. Talking to somebody over the table, because then that person who's your prospect has a good experience, and Google, because of the algorithms are pretty damn good, will figure out that you are being natural about it, etc. And to try and trick the system of Google is not really an effective strategy in the long run. It just doesn't work. Now, as I said, once you've got them, you want them to get them to do business with you. Now, what I'm going to refer to next is basically gated content, meaning you put the content behind a gate, i.e. the client needs to identify themselves or the prospect. And here, once again, as I said, the type of content that you're going to give is content that is relevant to your prospect. Like, you're not going to give what would we say? Gyratory crushing tips is not relevant to a person that's not using gyratory crushers in his industry. But to a person who's interested in that, it's a highly relevant piece of content, and he would be willing to exchange his email address for your content, and then you can feed him more information later on your content. And then he's also happy because, hey, there's somebody there that can help me. One of the most effective types of gated content is CAD drawings. Now, before you get scared and say, oh, but what about my competitors getting your gated content? Remember, a true prospect here for you is not really interested in the internal workings of your thing. And I'll give an example now. What they are really interested in, how does this thing or widget of yours fit into my plant? So it's really a general idea of the size and the battery limits and the connection of your device to the rest of the plant. An example of this is, let's say I want to build a house and I want a fireplace. So if there was, let's call it the fireplace or fiery firers, was the only company in my area or country that would give me a drawing of the fireplace, and I give it to my architect and he draws that fireplace drawing into my house that I want to building. Now, and let's say once that we get to that space that I need to go and buy the fireplace, do you think I'm going to buy a fireplace from another guy that hasn't given me the drawing? Especially if the fireplace, in terms of percentage of the entire house cost, is about 1 or 2% or 0.5%, and that guy's 50% more expensive than the next guy. Do you think I'm really going to be concerned about the price of the final product, especially when you've helped me with the CAD drawing? Now, this is exactly the idea here. And they found that about 89% of the CAD drawings that get handed to, from an engineering perspective, to engineering companies doing the design, leads into sales. So do you want to compete in the 11% market or the 89% market? It's up to you, the choice. Very little competition, the 89% market, and the 2% and 11%, a lot of competition. And then there are other types of tools, things you can give to the clients to make them identify themselves, is like in-depth case studies, white papers, product configurators, webinars. Webinars, another nice one, is because you can create anticipation, excitement, like Apple does. Apple does it before they launch. They do pre-launch and they create excitement. Now you can do exactly the same. Create excitement with a webinar. And the beauty of a webinar is, and remember I said getting your subject matter expert in front of your prospect. Think about this. That's also the beauty of digital marketing. It's 24/7. Once the recording is made, it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the prospect that really wants that information. So you record the webinar once and you put it, and you can use it in your various sequences and excite your clients. Guides and eBooks is another way. As I've said, put it gated content, and this is probably one of the easier ways to get that initial identification of your prospect out. Then, as I've said, this whole thing is about an entire ecosystem. So as you can see, yes, your content is the fuel that drives the entire framework over here. But your website is central because of the long sales cycle. But once you get your audience coming in and you've got them, put ads in front of them and nurture them to identify themselves, you can nurture them through the long sales cycle that we have in our industry, and hopefully this leads to a sale to you. So a website should not just be a brochure out there on the World Wide Web. It should be a system that helps you get sales.